I never thought I'd say this, but my graduation day wasn't about the degree. It wasn't about walking the stage, shaking hands, or even hearing my name called. It was about finally standing in front of the people who spent years tearing me down and taking back everything they thought they broke. For as long as I can remember, I was the family disappointment, the one who couldn't take a joke, who was too sensitive, who made everything about themselves. Every insult from my father, every snide comment from my siblings, and every awkward silence from my mom stacked up until I started believing they might be right. I wasn't loud, I wasn't dramatic, I didn't fight back. I just kept showing up, quietly enduring, quietly surviving, until I didn't. Because on that stage in downtown Chicago, dressed in a cap and gown they never thought I'd earn, I had more than a degree in my hands. I had proof. I had a house with my name on the deed. I had answers to questions they didn't even know were coming. And most importantly, I had nothing left to lose. You ever wonder what happens when the black sheep gets tired of staying quiet? When the one they dismissed for years finally says, "Enough?" What happens when the scapegoat gets a microphone and refuses to be silent anymore? This isn't about revenge. It's about the truth. About saying what needed to be said a long time ago, in front of the people who pretended there was nothing wrong. They wanted me to stay small, but I grew bigger than they ever imagined. And I didn't just rise, I made sure they watched me. Do it. This is how it really happened, and why I'll never go back. It started the second I saw them. I'd invited them because, well, part of me still wanted them to see me win. As much as I told myself I was over it, there was a small stubborn hope that maybe, just maybe, they'd show up and act proud, pretend even, just for one day. They sat in the middle row, my dad, Calvin, arms crossed like he was sitting through a boring meeting. My mom, Linda, silent and stiff beside him, like she was bracing for something. My siblings, Vanessa and Marcus, both looked like they were doing me some kind of favor by even being there. When my name was called, the crowd clapped. A few people even cheered. I walked across the stage, took my diploma and looked out over the audience, and there they were. Calvin, stone-faced, Marcus smirking, Vanessa scrolling on her phone. Linda avoided my eyes. Later, when we gathered outside for photos, Calvin leaned in close and said, just loud enough for me to hear, "Still can't believe you pulled this off. Honestly, I thought you'd drop out again." I stared at him. It wasn't even a fresh jab. It was the same lazy insult he'd recycled since I was 17. But hearing it today, right after walking the stage, that was it. That was the last straw. I looked at him, and instead of shrinking like I usually did, I smiled. Not because I found it funny, but because I knew something he didn't. I knew this was going to be the last time he'd ever say something like that without a consequence. He didn't realize he'd just given me the green light. All those years of biting my tongue, pretending I didn't hear it, keeping the peace, I was done. He thought I'd laugh it off. He expected silence or maybe a forced smile. What he got instead was the beginning of the end. I adjusted the strap on my gown, stood up straighter, and looked him dead in the eye. "You know what, Dad? You're right. It is surprising. Because I managed all of this while cleaning up your mess behind the scenes." He blinked, just once. His face didn't move, but his eyes gave it away. He was trying to figure out what I meant. My mum looked confused. Marcus shifted his weight. Vanessa looked up from her phone. I had their attention now. I didn't need to raise my voice. I didn't need to scream. I just needed to keep talking because I had receipts, I had time, and most importantly, I had an audience. And I was just getting started. I could have walked away after that. Let the moment hang, let the confusion stew. But I didn't. I took a slow breath and looked around, just loud enough for the rest of the group to hear me clearly. "I closed on my house last week," I said. There it was, the first crack in their expressions. Vanessa's eyebrows lifted slightly. Marcus tilted his head like he misheard. My mom gave this awkward little smile, the kind that says, maybe they're joking. But I wasn't joking. I repeated it, slower this time. "I bought a house, all mine. No roommates, no co-signer, just me." It was different. I could feel it, like a shift in the temperature. The kind of moment where everyone's pretending it's not a big deal, but their eyes say otherwise. Calvin laughed, short, dismissive, sharp. With what money? That was his reflex. Mock first, understand later. He didn't even care if... It made sense. Just had to keep the illusion that I was still beneath him. But the rest of them didn't join in this time. Because this wasn't some dream I was talking about, this was real. I had the paperwork in my bag, I had photos on my phone, I had keys in my pocket, literal proof, right next to my diploma. I looked straight at him and said, "The kind of money you never thought I could make." His mouth opened like he wanted to respond, but nothing came out. And that silence? That was new. Vanessa finally chimed in. "Wait, you're serious?" I nodded. "Yeah. I didn't say anything before, because I didn't want the energy around it, but it's done. It's mine, bought and paid for." Marcus squinted, doing the math in his head, trying to figure out how I pulled it off. I could see it bothering him, like it physically didn't sit right with him that I'd achieved something without asking him or anyone else for help. And my mum, she didn't say a word, but her face, yes, it shifted. That smile was gone, and behind it something like discomfort was starting to creep in. This was the moment they realized the version of me they'd built in their heads wasn't real anymore. The failure, the tag-along, the one they never took seriously, that person didn't exist, they just didn't know what came next. But I did. I didn't need to raise my voice. I didn't need to make a scene. All I did was pull out my phone and tap open the Photos app. "I figured you wouldn't believe me," I said, turning the screen around so they could see. "So here it is." I held it up, an image of the front of my house. A clean, modern place just outside the city, with a little front porch and dark trim. New siding, clean lines, not flashy but solid, real. Vanessa leaned forward instinctively, eyes narrowing. "That's yours?" "All mine," I said. "Closed on it 5 days ago, no rent, no debt, just me." She blinked. "Where?" "Lincoln Square." That hit even harder than the house itself. It wasn't just that I bought a place. It was where I bought it. That's not an easy neighborhood to just land in, especially not without help. Marcus looked genuinely irritated now. "How'd you even get approved for that?" "Credit, savings, discipline, you know, the stuff no one thought I was capable of." That landed like a slap. It wasn't what I said. It was the reminder of everything they didn't know about me, everything I'd been building while they were too busy assuming I was struggling, too busy writing me off to even ask how I was doing. Calvin stayed quiet, probably trying to figure out if I was bluffing, but I wasn't, and he knew it. I could see it in the way he clenched his jaw, tight, quiet, rattled. I pulled up another photo, interior this time. Hardwood floors, stainless steel kitchen, sunlight pouring through wide windows. Vanessa crossed her arms. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" I looked her dead in the eye. "Because I didn't owe you that." That one stung. She flinched, just barely. But it was enough. I watched the shift happen in real time. The smugness on Marcus's face slipped. Vanessa's voice got quieter. Even Linda's usual blank expression cracked just slightly, like she wasn't sure what version of me she was looking at. They were rattled now, not because I was trying to shake them, but because, for once, they had no control over the narrative. For once I wasn't playing defense. I was setting the terms, and the look on their faces told me they were finally starting to get it. I wasn't the one trailing behind anymore. The silence around me was thick now, tense and tight, like they were waiting for me to stop. But I didn't, because they still thought this was just about the house, just about proving I could stand on my own. They had no idea I was just warming up. So I said, "I should probably mention something else while I've got you all here." Calvin's eyes narrowed. "What now?" I didn't respond. I just reached into my folder, the one I'd brought with my diploma, and pulled out a thin envelope. "This," I said, "is a copy of the second mortgage you took out against the family house last year." Linda froze. "What?" she said, her voice suddenly sharp. "What are you talking about?" I handed her the papers. "Check the date. Check the signature. He did it without telling you." She looked at the paperwork, then back at Calvin. Her hands were trembling. You said we were fine. You said everything was under control. Calvin didn't answer right away. He glanced at the paper, then shrugged. It was temporary, just to cover some short-term cash flow. You used the house, I said, voice even. You risked everything Mom owns without telling her. You borrowed against a house that's barely halfway paid off. Linda's mouth opened, but no sound came out. That's when I realized something. She didn't just feel betrayed, she felt stupid. She'd spent years defending him, covering for him, swallowing her instincts every time something didn't add up. And now, in front of everyone, she was holding proof that he'd gone behind her back and gambled with her security. Vanessa stepped forward. Wait, Mom didn't know? I shook my head. Nope, she had no idea. Marcus gave Calvin a sideways glance. Seriously? You didn't even tell her? Linda turned to Calvin, the paper shaking in her hand. You didn't think I deserved to know, Calvin scoffed. It's handled now. Why are you making it into a scene? Because you lied, she said louder this time. You lied to me. You used our house like it was your personal wallet. He rolled his eyes. You're being dramatic. No, she said, finally stepping forward. I'm being realistic. It was surreal watching her unravel right there. The woman, who always kept the peace, who sat quiet through every argument, was suddenly the one raising her voice. And for once it wasn't at me. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I just stood there, letting the weight of the moment do what I never could alone, make them see what I'd seen for years. The cracks weren't new. They'd always been there. I just happened to be the first one to stop pretending. And now that the truth was out, it was like something shifted. The family dynamic, the one that always tilted against me, had finally lost its balance. I wasn't the one being interrogated. I wasn't disappointed. I wasn't the liar, the failure, the one they had to tiptoe around. I was the one holding the truth. And it wasn't about revenge, it was about clarity, about ending the silence they all benefited from. Because if you keep quiet long enough, people start believing the lie is reality. And in that moment, I made sure they knew. Reality had just changed. There was a heaviness hanging in the air, like the gravity in the room had shifted. And it had. But we weren't done yet, because Calvin wasn't the only one keeping secrets. I turned to Vanessa next. Her arms were crossed, expression tight. She looked like someone bracing for a storm, one she thought might pass her by. So, while we're clearing the air, I said, Mom, have you checked your savings account recently? Vanessa's eyes snapped to me. Don't. I ignored her. You might want to look into a few withdrawals over the past year. Small ones at first, then bigger. Always spaced out, always just under the radar. Linda looked confused. What are you talking about? I pulled out a second envelope and handed it to her. Bank statements. Every unauthorized transfer. You'll notice most of them happened while Vanessa had your card for emergencies. Vanessa's face flushed. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that, I said. You thought no one would notice because it wasn't huge. You dipped into her savings slowly, just enough that she'd chalk it up to forgetfulness or fees. I paid some of it back, she shot back, desperate now. That's not the defense you think it is. Linda's hands were shaking again. You were stealing from me. It wasn't stealing, Vanessa tried to cut in. What would you call it? I asked. Taking money from someone's account without their knowledge, lying about it, and covering your tracks. Vanessa looked at our mum. I was in a rough spot. I thought I could replace it before she noticed. You didn't even ask, Linda whispered. Her voice was small now. I trusted you. Her words hit harder than anything I could have added, but I wasn't finished. I turned toward Marcus. I suppose now's a good time to talk about the business loan you siphoned from Dad's company account. His expression changed instantly. Defensive, that's none of your business. Actually, I said, it became my business when I had to co-sign a check for the LLC I used to help you set up. Remember that? He didn't respond. You used my info without telling me. You ran your little side hustle through Dad's business, hoping no one would notice. And when it started going south, you dissolved it quietly and disappeared. I had to field calls from your creditors. Calvin looked stunned. Wait, you did what? Marcus finally snapped. Oh, come on. You think I'm the only one who ever tried to get ahead? You think I didn't learn it from watching you lie, cut corners, and cheat your way through life? It was like the floor dropped. Everyone was shouting. Calvin yelling at Marcus, Linda crying, Vanessa defending herself, trying to twist her actions into some form of desperation. Chaos broke loose like it had always been waiting just under the surface. And I stood right in the middle of it, calm. This was what truth looked like when it finally broke through years of silence. This wasn't about revenge. This was about accountability, about pulling the curtain back on people who built their status on a foundation of silence and shame. Watching them turn on each other? That wasn't the plan, but maybe it was necessary because the illusion was gone. And now there was no going back. They were unraveling, all of them. Years of lies and games, finally exposed, and not one of them could keep it together. The people who once spoke over me, dismissed me, humiliated me in front of each other and strangers, they were crumbling in front of a few facts, and I could have walked away right then. Let the mess sit. But I needed to say one more thing. I looked around at all of them, my mom still stunned, my dad furious and scrambling for control. Vanessa and Marcus, both trying to rewrite their actions in real time, and I said it as plainly as I could. I'm done. They went quiet. I don't mean for today, I mean for good. Vanessa started to protest. You're blowing this out of proportion. No, I said, I'm finally seeing it in proportion. I paused just long enough to let the silence grow uncomfortable. I've spent most of my life trying to earn your approval, trying to make myself small so you'd stop attacking me, or notice me, or include me, and I'm tired. I looked directly at Linda. You watched it all happen and never said a word, and I understand now that was your choice. But I don't have to keep choosing you. To Marcus and Vanessa, you got to live in a world where you were always right, always smarter, always better. And I let that happen. I stopped correcting the narrative so I could survive the day-to-day. And finally, to Calvin, you taught me that silence meant survival. That talking back got you cut deeper. But now I've spoken, and there's nothing left to fear. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my house keys, and held them up. This is mine, and so is the peace that comes with it. So from now on, no more texts, no more guilt trips, no more fake family dinners. I'm out. Vanessa looked like she wanted to cry. Marcus looked furious. Linda didn't look at me at all, and that told me everything I needed to know. No dramatics, no shouting, just a line, firm, clear, and final. Because after everything, they didn't deserve access to the healed version of me. The silence didn't last long. By the time I got home that night, my phone was already lighting up. Texts from my mum, missed calls from Vanessa, even a voicemail from Calvin acting like none of it had happened. Like we just had a tough conversation, not a total unmasking. Let's talk, one of the messages said. Don't shut us out, read another. Then came the guilt. Vanessa sent a photo of us as kids. Linda asked if I'd eaten. Marcus texted, that was low, even for you. Classic tactics. Make me feel responsible for their discomfort. Make me doubt what just happened, pull me back in, even if it meant pretending nothing had exploded. But I didn't answer any of them, not because I was angry, but because I was. Done. This wasn't about proving a point anymore. I'd said what needed to be said. I'd exposed what they worked so hard to hide. And now I wasn't interested in playing the role they'd assigned me. I wasn't the problem child. I wasn't the underachiever. I wasn't the emotional one. I was the one who finally walked away. And it amazed me how quickly they tried to flip it, how fast they moved from denial to guilt, from silence to noise. Because that's how control works. It doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers, come back, let's move on. They wanted to put a lid back on it, wrap it all up in a half-hearted apology, and hope I'd go back to being the quiet one. But I couldn't do that anymore. I blocked Calvin's number, archived the group chat, muted their social media. And just like that, the noise went quiet again. Not peaceful at first, but necessary. Because peace doesn't always feel peaceful right away. Sometimes it's just the absence of chaos, the absence of noise. In that quiet, I started to breathe differently, waking up in the morning without dread, coming home without a knot in my chest. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't sad either. I was just free, and I wasn't going to give that up, not for anyone. A week later, I got one final message. It was from my mum, just a single line. I didn't know. I'm sorry. I stared at it for a long time, not because it moved me. Not because I didn't believe her, but because it came too late, and part of me wondered if she would have ever said it, if I hadn't forced the truth into the open. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Some apologies don't need rejection or acceptance. They just need to exist in the air, quietly marking the end of something, a slow, quiet closing of a chapter that should have ended years ago. Because by then I'd already moved into my new place. The first night in that house, I sat on the floor with takeout and no furniture, just me and my silence. And for the first time in years, the quiet didn't feel like punishment. It felt like space, like air I could actually breathe. No backhanded comments, no walking on eggshells, no pretending to laugh at things that weren't funny, just stillness and freedom. It wasn't some big movie ending. There was no celebration, no montage of success, just peace, real, grounded peace. I still get the occasional text. Birthdays, holidays, guilt wrapped in small talk, and I hope you're okay laced with, you should come home. But I don't respond, because I made a promise to myself that day, not just to walk away, but to stay gone. They taught me who they were over and over again, and I finally listened. This isn't a story about revenge, it's a story about freedom, about realizing you don't owe anyone continued access to you just because they share your last name. And if no one's ever told you this, you're allowed to leave. You're allowed to choose peace over tradition, and you're allowed to never look back.